If you're fighting for a highly unpopular cause, how can you trick people into believing that you have the numbers? How can you project more power than you actually have? Well, one of the methods that certain academics are using is to change the definition so that when they're fighting for the unpopular cause, they trick people into believing that they're fighting for a completely opposite cause that is popular. For example, the changing of the word fascism. Most people don't like fascism because they're thinking about its original definition, that of a dictatorship where the state gets to control every aspect of an individual's life. And it is ruled by a dictator, which has zero accountability. And this is why most people don't want to have their human rights violated. As such, they do not want fascism. But communists define fascism by a completely different definition. They say that fascism is capitalism. So when you have a small group of fringe communists going around fighting against fascism, other people think they are fighting against a completely different cause, which they are not. And as such, they manage to portray the numbers by having a couple of useful idiots join their rally. And if those people were to know that by fascism they mean capitalism, those people would have never joined the rally or the march to begin with. A similar example seems to be happening recently with white supremacy. Now, if you were to ask your mother what is white supremacy, she would probably give you the definition, well, it's an ideology where white people think they're superior to everyone else. Or it's an ideology where white people want to take away the citizenship of every single non-white person in the country. And this is the definition that the overwhelming amount of people use. And when they oppose white supremacy, they oppose the system that the definition almost everyone uses defines. As such, people from the academia that represent a very fringe ideology have co-opted the definition of white supremacy and made it to represent something completely else. And here we have a lady by the name of Judith Katz who has finished a doctorate, and she also written a book on white awareness for anti-racism training. She's got a lot of credentials. She's got awards. She was considered the pioneer of diversity by Profiles in Diversity Journal in 2007. She's got the Legend of Diversity by International Society of Diversity and Inclusion Professionals. So as you can see, her list of credentials goes on and on and on. This is not an uneducated person. This is not someone that I picked randomly from Twitter. She is someone of well-renown into the anti-racism ideology. And her work can be found at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And a lot of people recently have pointed this out, and they're very upset about what they're reading here. Now, one of the things that they define, and notice how they play with words, is when they talk about whiteness. Whiteness, in their view, has nothing to do with white people. It's a mindset, if you will. It's some general attitude and practices that even non-white people can do, but they're evil because they have a colonial in nature. It's the genetic fallacy. If something comes from a bad place, then it must be by definition evil. And they say that white dominant culture or whiteness refers to the ways white people and their tradition, attitudes, and way of life have been normalized over time and now are considered standards practice in the United States. Now, I, as an Eastern European, find this definition to be very insulting because here in Europe, we do not go by white people. We view every different ethnicity, European ethnicity, to be separate. Many of them have historical grievances towards one another. Others have historical bonds of friendship with one another. Like if you travel to England and then you travel to Romania, you're going to see a different culture, different ways of life. You're going to see this rich diversity that these people are trying to erase, which is why it's very upsetting. And what's interesting is that they also believe that if you were to say all these people look the same, to be racist, but they have no problem when they do this to Europeans. And there was quite a struggle in order to integrate at the time, if you read some American history. Like when the factories in the United States were booming and they required cheap labor, and Germany was going through a recession, America imported a lot of Germans. And these German people didn't speak English. They were mistreated, and they had different cultures than the Americans did. A lot of them brought with them communism into the New World. And there was this massive friction. In fact, it's one of the reasons we celebrate Workers' Day, because of the Haymarket Affair, which had a couple of workers protesting peacefully, demanding better rights, demanding better working conditions. And a couple of German communists threw a bomb into the police that was there, and that caused the police to shoot at the workers, and it was a horrible massacre. And other socialist nations in Europe used that massacre in order to justify celebrating the Workers' Day. It's horrible, but this is history. You know, a lot of people want to push it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. They want to forget about the newspapers that were written in German so that average Americans couldn't read, but the immigrants could. And they were inciting the workers to violence. They were inciting the workers to try and change the capitalist system. So when you say, you know, white people as a whole, you're ignoring these struggles. You're ignoring the past that existed. 200 years ago, if you were to write something like this, people would laugh you out. But the second thing that's also really upsetting, I guess, is that you're assuming that other races are not capable of the things you're writing here, and I'll read them in a bit. And not only that, but if some people that aren't white are trying to adopt some of these principles, you would consider them evil. Like they need to be cleansed of sin, I guess. So what are these horrible things that American culture is having that you consider that needs to be changed? Rugged individualism. So the individual is the primary unit, and this teaches self-reliance. Independence and autonomy are highly valued and rewarded. So the problem that they have with this mindset, I suppose, is that they want people to be reliant on a third party and not to think for themselves. So whether that is the state, whether that is the mainstream media, whether that is activists, they don't like it when people think for themselves, which is what fascism is pretty much about. Like fascism controls the media, they control the state, and they tell people what to think in every single situation. And the opposite of fascism is when people think for themselves and they make their own decisions. The negative aspect of this, however, is that if you make your own decisions, you can make mistakes. So you get the saying, you get what you deserve. Like you made these decisions and now you're suffering because of it. While the socialist way is that, no, you didn't make these decisions. It's society at large that's to blame. It's the people around you. It's the culture. It's everything but yourself. So yes, they do not like this idea of rugged individualism. They think it's harmful. And they're telling other people not to do it. It's to do with whiteness. It's with colonialism. Then they talk about how bad the family structure is. Like, notice how every single one of these is supposed to take you to fascism. Like, it's supposed to get the individual to worship the state. So the nuclear family, the father, mother, 2, 3 children, is the ideal social unit. The husband is the breadwinner and head of the household, while the wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Now here's what's interesting. It used to be that the idea of forcing a woman to become the housewife was evil. And I kind of agree. Like, I believe that everyone should have their right to decide their own future and pursue their own happiness. But now it seems that if a woman wants to pursue her own happiness and become a housewife willingly, there have been plenty of examples when celebrities did this. They were heavily criticized on Twitter. They had activists send death threats to them and do all the evil things because they're promoting this evil and horrible concept. Instead of the activists talking about something that I think Elizabeth Warren talked about, and it's something that she wrote in a book that is a lot better than any right-wing economic has ever wrote. And she talks about how the turning point in the United States as a nation was when you couldn't afford to maintain a family with one income. Like, can you understand that in the past, one man working, okay, just one income, could sustain a family of 4 Like, that is bewildering. Me as an Eastern European, I can't understand that. Like, it's just something that I can't grasp. And no one wants to talk about that time period. I mean, here in Europe, we have gender equality in Romania. It's one of the best rated countries when it comes to the gender pay gap. Why is it? Is it because we have activists and we have academics and people that are trying to end gender discrimination? No, it's because we're a poor country. It's because simply you cannot afford to just have one person working and the other person staying home. Both people need to work. And it's also the mindset that Romanian fathers have and even Romanian mothers have, that if they have a daughter who wants to go to journalism school, the father will say, no, I'm not going to allow you, I'm not going to pay for you to live under my roof if you want to go to journalism school. You're going to go to STEM, you're going to stop being a parasite, a lich on your mommy and daddy paycheck, and you're going to be able to sustain yourself and put bread on your table. And once you do that, once you have your job, once you have everything in order, then you can go to journalism school if you choose. And notice how, this is rugged individualism. This is bad. But this rugged individualism is bringing gender equity and less of a pay gap in Romania compared to all the other European nations that are spending millions of dollars on activism and all of the other nonsense. But yeah, they don't look at the results. This is another thing that I noticed with the left nowadays. They want to push for policy with no accountability. In other words, they don't want to quantify, okay, what is the percentage of racism in this country compared to the neighboring countries? So that when they implement policy and they implement programs, like for example this one, it's like, let's change the mindset of people. They don't want to see, all right, well, have the race relations improved compared to the neighboring nations? Have they stagnated? Have they become worse? So that we can hold the people accountable that we elected and we paid money from the taxpayer to make these changes. They don't do that. They never do that. It's like a sinkhole. It's like the ultimate money laundering machine where money just poofs into activism and you never get to see it ever again. But anyway, right, another thing that I noticed with the idea that the woman staying at home is evil is that for some reason, a woman that decides to stay at home and take care of the kids is oppressive. But a woman that goes to suck the cock at McDonald's as a corporation and work her ass 10, 11 hours a day, never getting to see her kids during the daytime, that is very progressive. That is very liberating. That is very good all of a sudden, right? Did you not notice that? Which is kind of interesting because all the corporations love this type of ideology because it moves people away from the class struggle and it brings people away into a fake type of race struggle. So that at the corporation, people don't unionize anymore. They don't see, all right, well, we're all in this together. We're all working for this corporation that's abusing us. How about we unionize and then we try to make a strike? Now, by the way, I'm definitely not saying that unions are beneficial or that they work or that it's a good thing. What I am saying is that corporations hate unions. And because of that, they try to crack down the unions by buying books like White Fragility from David DeAngelo in order to keep their workers at each other's throats, focused on each other rather than to look up at the corporation. A topic for another time. Then you have emphasis on scientific method, which of course is bad because these people love the subjective method, the romanticism as an ideology. Romanticism states that everything you see, nothing is true, nothing is objective. Like we can all be brains in a jar for all we know, and there's no way of telling that. Like no amount of evidence will prove that that is not the case. And the reason they want to go with this type of ideology is because it helps people have double think. Like you can think at one point that something is good, and then at tomorrow you can think that the same thing when applied the principle to something else is bad. It's pretty much what Orwell used to write about. So yes, they hate the scientific method, which would actually be able to quantify and to see how much their policies are having an impact, whether it's working or not. Definitely seems to be working for the activists to get money, but I don't know how much the activist actually manages to change in society. Then they complain about the Protestant work ethic, which is that hard work is key to success, work before play, And if you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Now, I want to point out that this is not just a Protestant work ethic. You get to see this work ethic in South Korea, you get to see this work ethic in Japan and other countries around the world. But what's interesting is that they are trying to convince people that this is a bad mindset to have. So imagine a black kid going to this museum and reading about whiteness and white culture and how all of this is evil, and how the idea that hard work is key to success is bad, that you should work before play is evil. Like all of this is being pushed into his psyche. Like, this is what these people want. And I think like the reason they're doing it is to cause people to be reliant on the state, to just want government handouts, to vote left-leaning parties, so that people can't pull themselves by the bootstraps. No, but think about it, okay? It kind of makes sense. It's the idea that if you teach a man how to fish, he can fish for forever, and then he doesn't need you anymore. Versus giving a man a fish and you feed him for a day, and then he needs you the next day, right? It's one of those sayings that left-leaning parties are voted by the poor, so it's their interest to constantly have poor people. Right-wing parties are voted by the rich, so it's their interest to make poor people richer, so they vote for them. Simple logic, but again, logic is the scientific method. It's evil. Then they talk about Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. Non-tolerance for deviation from the single God concept. Now, every single country is going to have a religion. And every single country is going to have, like if you're religious and you believe in something, then you're going to automatically have an intolerance towards other religions. It's just the way it works. Like, if I'm an atheist, I do not believe in other people's religions. So if I were to see people using their supernatural beliefs in order to dictate my way of life, of course I wouldn't like it. However, what's interesting is that in America you can have your own religion as long as you use it for yourself. Like if you have a moral code and you live your life by it, that's fine. But what people, I notice, get upset is when they use their moral code to push it onto others. That's when people have a problem with it. Then they say that it's based on Northern European immigrants. And then it's like a heavy focus on the British Empire. So now we have Northern Europe, we have Western Europe, and then it's like the Greek and Roman tradition. So now you have Southern Europe. That's an entire fucking continent, woman. And you're putting it in the same melting pot and you're saying, oh, well, it's whiteness. Like, so much rich diversity and rich and different historical and cultural things have been put together, and you're like, oh no, it's all the same. And then it's like, it's bad to plan for the future, delayed gratification, progress is always best, tomorrow will always be better. Like, everything they're talking about is that if you say life is not all about pleasure, life is about struggle to provide for your family, you know, like my parents provided for me, so it's my duty to provide for my children. No, that's wrong. That's white cow. That's whiteness. It needs to stop. And if anyone else thinks the same, you're thinking like the white man. You're thinking like the oppressor. Isn't this evil, by the way? I usually don't like to use this concept of evil, but isn't this evil? Like, it's trying to keep other people from achieving success. Then regarding aesthetics, based on European culture, woman's beauty based on blonde, thin Barbie. Men's attractiveness is based on economic status, power, and intellect. Well, I'm sorry, you know, but the dick wants what the dick wants. If you want to have a conversation, I can make a Skype call and I can put my cock on the line and you can talk with it about what it finds appealing and what it isn't. You know, we can have like this discussion between your mouth and my cock, and maybe you can convince my cock to like something else. I personally have no choice in the matter. You know, my cock is like that compass from Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, it points to the thing that it likes, and I can't get it to stop. Then it complains about the holidays based on Christian religions and based on white history and blah, blah, blah. So they're basically complaining that America is a white majority country at this point. Like, it's not got nothing to do with white supremacy. It moved away from white supremacy and whiteness. And it went just into the idea that it's a majority white country. Now that is evil. And I think like they need something to justify their paycheck. But not only this, it's like majority whites have power. Like, what do you understand by power? Like, people in the parliament, is that the only type of power that you can have, like political power? Because there's a lot of corporations that are owned by non-white people in the United States. You have the financial power, like the bankers, and then you have the influencers, which are the media. Like, the person writing this has a lot of power. Like, they managed to publish this into a museum, and they managed to get so many awards. Like, this is cultural power. I really hate this idea. It's like, yeah, it's like whites have all the power. Prove it. Like, you need to elaborate on it. I mean, if you look at the people who earn the most money in the United States, it's not the whites. Asians earn a lot more than whites. And like, look at this. Look how evil it is. Like, competition, be number one, win at all costs. Winner-loser dichotomy. It's like, okay, but even in other non-white countries, they have competitions. And the idea is to try and be number one, is to give you away your best. To try to be the best that you can be at something. Like, if you, like, I'm willing to bet that if this lady, when she gets older, has, unfortunately, a brain tumor, right? She's going to want the best surgeon to operate on her. Like, the best surgeon that she can afford, that she can get, she's going to want that person. She's not going to want any surgeon. She's not going to want, the guy that is he got diversity hiring because he's suffering from autism and there needed to be a checkbox in that hospital. No. She's going to want the best surgeon that's the best equipped to afford the job to remove her tumor. And you don't understand, like, with this mindset, you create good nations. It's why America is the most powerful military nation in the world, because they have scientists and people that are the number one at the things that they're doing in order to create technology so that they can apply it militarily. And then it goes down to the public sector, and people are benefiting from the technological advances that then get shipped throughout the world, and the whole humanity benefits. So, if this is a bad system, what would you replace it with? This is something that you notice when people are engaging in critical theory. They criticize the system, but they never offer a suggestion, like, what would you replace it with? What is your best version of a system? Apparently, like, communication, English is bad. It's like, yeah, but English is something that a lot of even white Americans had to learn, like Italians, Spanish, Germans. Everyone that went into the United States had to learn English. And then the idea that you shouldn't be polite. You know what I noticed? It's like when they say that being polite is a whiteness concept, and you have like this in-your-face activist that insults and curses even around children. It's fine when they do it, but the moment you insult them in return, then they get upset, and then they engage in cancel culture. Like, how could you say something like this? Like, imagine, like, be polite, all right? Go to some place and say the N-word. And it's like, well, I'm not engaging in whiteness anymore. I'm being rude because being polite is evil. See how they react? No, you should be polite, okay? Don't listen to these people. Be polite. See, this is why you come to my channel, so you can learn to be polite and never use the N-word. It's bad, it's horrible, and you shouldn't. Anyway, this was interesting. This is just mind-blowing. Let me know what you think. And I just think it's evil. Like, you're using this blood and soil ideology that this belongs to white people. No, these are just common principles that you notice around the world, that even other countries that are not white, when they apply these principles, they get good results. Objectively good results. But I guess, like, they don't want people to be successful. And again, like, they don't really... What's interesting is that they're not going to say why it's bad. For example, to have this rugged individualism. Right? Like, they don't say why is it bad for people to be self-reliant, for people to be independent, for people to have control of their lives. They don't say why it's bad. All they say is, no, this belongs to whiteness, and whiteness is evil. Okay, but, like, how is a person suffering if they're going to be in control of their own income, if they're going to be in control of their own decision-making process and all of that? Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section.